Hello everybody and welcome back to my garage. Today we're going to be doing a repair that I've been wanting to do for a very long time. Today we are going to be repairing this. This is the Nintendo Virtual Boy. And for those of you that don't know what this is a video game console that Nintendo briefly made in 1995, and it was a major flop. It's one of Nintendo's worst flops they've ever made, and as a result, it never gained the recognition that I think it deserved. Because this thing is really cool, and I'm so excited to be able to repair it and try to get it back to a fully functional state. And there's a few reasons as to why I'm super excited to repair this thing. So I don't want to keep you guys waiting. So without further ado, let's get started. So this is the Nintendo Virtual Boy. And to really understand why this console was such a flop, you have to realize what this really is. It's not something that you hook up to your TV and play like sitting on your couch like a traditional games console. This is a very early virtual reality headset. But it's not like modern VR headsets like the Oculus Quest, where you interact with the game with your hands and you're immersed in this 3D environment. All this really is just a three-dimensional game console that you look into as if it was a virtual reality headset. So how it works is you look into here and you see a three-dimensional game inside here. Now this does have a little fabric visor that is supposed to go here. I have it, I just don't have it on the console right now. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history of this thing so you can kind of understand why it's such an interesting thing. So this was made in the year 1995, and during that time the Super Nintendo would have been the latest console that Nintendo was producing at that point. So this came out only 1 year before the Nintendo 64. So why wasn't it a big hit like Nintendo wanted? This is the Nintendo Game Boy, an inarguably much more widely known video game console. This was Nintendo's very first ever portable video game console, and it was a huge success. In the mid-90s, Nintendo wanted to develop a successor to the Game Boy, and that, as you might have guessed, would turn out to be the Virtual Boy. So there's a few reasons why the Virtual Boy was such a flop. Number one was the displays that it used. Just like the Game Boy that came before it, the Virtual Boy only had displays that could display two colors, black and red. It could show up to 32 different shades of red, but it was not a color video game console like the Super Nintendo. Another reason that it flopped was because it's not really a game console that you can play with your friends, because you have to stick your head into it and nobody else can see what you're playing, which is obviously not ideal for multiplayer-based games. And in a way, you could say that as soon as the Virtual Boy came out, Nintendo must have known, at least somewhat, that it was not going to be a successful console, because in every single game that was produced for it, when the game first starts up, it will ask you whether you want to enable a feature called automatic pause. And what that is the game will automatically pause itself. It will tell you that it's paused. It'll tell you that automatic pause went into effect. And all that does is just allow you to have a break from playing the Virtual Boy, because it's a 3D based console. And of course, there were health concerns about young kids playing in 3D because it would affect the development of their eyes as they grew older. And I think one of the best reasons as to why this thing failed was just the way that you played it. It came with a little stand that you would attach the bottom of the Virtual Boy to, and you would have to sit in a chair and lean down and look into the Virtual Boy. It wasn't a portable console. You couldn't just sit in your recliner on your couch and play it. You had to have this thing on a flat surface, preferably a level surface, and it just wasn't a very ergonomic system at all. And I do have all of this hardware. I will show it to you later on, but for now, I just wanted to have the console front and center because that is what we're going to be working on today. And to give you an idea as to how much of a flop this was, the Virtual Boy came out in 1995 and it was discontinued only a year later in 1996. It sold only 770,000 units, so less than 1 million of these things were made, and in terms of how many games that were released, worldwide, there were only 22 games made officially for this system in its entire lifetime. Only 14 of those being released in North America. And of course, there are only 22 games made is because Nintendo pulled the plug on it so fast because it was such a horrible, horrible flop. To compare, the Wii U is Nintendo's second worst selling console at 13.6 million units. This didn't even reach 1 million. And so it is not a video game console that a lot of Nintendo fans remember as something that ever existed. But now, in 2022, this thing has kind of resigned itself to be a collector's piece. It's not something you come across every day. And unfortunately for the Virtual Boy, there was a decision that was made that ended up making a lot of these consoles fail over time. And so there aren't a lot of these left that actually still work perfectly. And I will get into that as we take it apart. Now, even though this thing was such a flop, I think this thing is really cool because no amount of emulation can match what the Virtual Boy is able to do. And as we take it apart, I will show you all of what makes it tick and show you some of the really cool things that it does that is honestly a miracle that it's able to pull these things off. But before we take it apart, let's take a little tour around the system. So on the top, you have a focus slider, and that's just to make the image that you see when looking inside appear in focus. And this dial, this is the IPD dial, and I will show you more about what this does once we take it apart. And here's the part of the console that you look into. This console is a stereo speaker system. There's a speaker here and here, so you do get stereo sound when you play games on this thing. Here's the bottom. I already have most of the screws on the bottom already taken out because I've been in this thing before. So here you have your volume slider, your headphone jack, cartridge slot is right there. The stand connects right here. You have an external link cable connection, so you could hook up to another Virtual Boy and play multiplayer games. And then you have your controller port right there. Now, this is something that I thought was funny when I first found this out. This console was such a failure and pulled from the market so quick that Nintendo didn't even make a cable to go into that port. So there was never an official cable released to go into that port. Now, I'm sure that someone out there has made a cable that could fit into that port and actually work, but you would have to rely on the existing Virtual Boy games to have compatibility with the link cable. And I'm not entirely sure if any do. That is something that I'll have to do more research on. And because I have all of the screws out already for the bottom, I can take this little thing off, and this will reveal the cartridge slot. Now, the cartridges on this are kind of different than a traditional Nintendo video game console or even their handheld Game Boys. Is that instead of having an edge connector for where the cartridge connects, there's actually a set of pins they use. So if you picture an IDE hard drive, the IDE connector has a bunch of pins on it. That's exactly what's here, is just a row of pins. And then the Virtual Boy cartridges themselves have a connector on them, and that will interface right there. So before we kick things off and start taking this thing apart, I want to show you how this thing actually looked when it was set up to be played, as well as some of the extra things that I got when I purchased this console off of eBay. So I'm going to move this aside for a second, and I'm going to show you the Virtual Boy stand. This is the stand that you would attach the Virtual Boy to when you're playing it. Now, this stand, I've seen many times where this stand breaks, and so it's not usable anymore. That has not happened to my stand, thankfully, so it's actually still usable. And so what you would do is you would take the stand like this, you would widen these two legs so that they snap. They will eventually snap when you stretch them out far enough. And then you get the stand, and then the Virtual Boy clicks in right there. And then you have this little knob here to tighten the connection on the Virtual Boy so that it doesn't fall out when you're playing. So that clicks in just like that. And so this is how it would look when you were playing it. It would be connected to the stand just like that, and you would put your head up to the Virtual Boy and play it. Now, of course, in order to play correctly, you would need the visor. And all it is just a little piece of plastic that is connected to this piece of fabric by these little things that stick out of the plastic going into holes in the fabric. So that looks like this. And it just clips into the Virtual Boy with these two clips right here. So you would put that up to it like this, snap, snap. And so that is what it looks like when the visor is installed. And this is the Virtual Boy's controller. And it's actually a very nice feeling controller. It's very ergonomic. It feels very nice in your hands. So here you have two D-pads, select start A and B, and this is actually the power switch for the console. The power supply is hooked up to the back of the controller here, and you could either use batteries or they had a little AC adapter that you could connect to this. And that is where the main power for the Virtual Boy comes in at. And then on the back you have an L and R button here. And then so you take your controller and you would hook it up to your Virtual Boy like so, into this port right there. And I actually don't have the battery pack for the controller. Instead, I have the AC adapter. And it's a little funny how they chose to implement the AC adapter, because what they've done is this is the end that goes in your controller, and it's roughly in the shape of the battery pack that you would have installed if you wanted to run it off batteries. But if you notice, it says open lid to make sure plug from AC adapter is firmly plugged into AC tap. And you notice that the AC plug is going inside this thing. This lid actually opens, and there's an AC adapter hooked into a little connector right there. So it's not just one device, it's the AC adapter plus this little piece that goes into your controller. And as you can see right there, there it is, Virtual Boy AC adapter tap. But look at what it says here. Use with Super NES AC adapter only. What? Well, that's right. Nintendo didn't use a custom AC adapter for the Virtual Boy. They straight up used the same exact adapter from the Super Nintendo. They didn't even bother making their own adapter for it. As you can see, the model number SMS-002. This is a Super Nintendo AC adapter, so you could use this on a Super Nintendo. Hey everybody, this is Editor Max. So I actually did notice something while editing that differentiates this AC adapter from the Super Nintendo one. So if you take a close look at the adapter, it actually says use with Super NES and Virtual Boy. So that clearly identifies this adapter as being the one that shipped with the Virtual Boy, and it was made after the Virtual Boy went into production. So I thought that was kind of interesting. They just chose to use the same adapter on the Virtual Boy because if it works, it works. So you would plug the AC adapter into the wall, plug the other end into here, make sure it's plugged in all the way and it's routed through here, close the lid, and then take your controller and then slide this in. I have to remember how it slides in. Just like that. Snaps. And so that's how this would look if you had the AC adapter. You'd have two wires coming out of it on the top and bottom. And so that's how this whole setup works. It goes from the AC adapter to the controller, out from the controller, and the console actually receives its power from the controller because of that. So a very interesting way to set up your console. So you can kind of understand how this whole thing was convoluted from the get-go. But those are not the only things that I received with this Virtual Boy. Oh no, far from it. Because this was kind of a holy grail find for me. And as soon as I saw it online, I was like, hold everything, I have to buy this. Because what you're about to see, I don't think anyone else has ever seen in an eBay listing before. Besides the necessities for the Virtual Boy, the stand, the visor, the controller, and the AC adapter, I also received many other things. The original manual for the Virtual Boy. Now it's kind of in rough shape, but it is still bound together and it's fully readable. Now I'm sure that this is scanned somewhere online. I don't think this is a new document, but if this is not available easily anywhere, I'm sure it's like on archive.org or something, but in the case that it isn't, let me know in the comments and I can try my best to scan this and upload it somewhere, because I can't imagine that a lot of these physical manuals are easily obtainable anymore. I also received a game, and another game, and another game, and another game, and all of these other ones for the Virtual Boy. And as you remember, I said that for the North American market, there were only 14 games produced. This is 12 of them, so I am only missing 2 out of the entire North American Virtual Boy library. One of the games I'm missing that I've been playing on emulation for a while now, it's really good. It's called Jack Bros, and that is a game that I do not have, and it goes for $1,000 plus on eBay loose. Not in the box, not with the manual, just by itself. So it's very expensive. And the other one I'm missing is Vertical Force. Now, I don't think that's a rare game. It's just one that didn't come included with this bundle. So the games that we do have are Water World, Panic Bomber, Mario Clash, 3D Tetris. This was the last Virtual Boy game ever to be released. And this here is one of the most well-known games and probably the best one for the Virtual Boy. Virtual Boy Wario Land. Now this game is one of the better Wario Lands in my opinion. It's very fun. I've played it on emulation for a long time now, and it's a very cool game. You should definitely try it if you're wanting to emulate the Virtual Boy. It's the first game that I tried. We have Red Alarm, Galactic Pinball, Nestor's Funky Bowling, Golf, Virtual League Baseball, Teleroboxer, and Mario's Tennis. This game was a pack-in title for the Virtual Boy, so it is very common to see this game when you're looking for Virtual Boys online. But this wasn't all I received either with the Virtual Boy, because of the 12 games that I received for this console, for 11 of them, I received their manuals. So there's one game out of this bunch that I don't have the manual for. These manuals are in great condition, they're still bound, and they're perfectly readable still. And if any of these are not easily available online, let me know in the comments and I'll try to scan these. So of the manuals I of course have Virtual Boy Wario Land, Virtual League Baseball, Teleroboxer, Nestor's Funky Bowling, Panic Bomber, Red Alarm, Mario's Tennis, Mario Clash, Golf, Galactic Pinball, and 3D Tetris. So one of these games, I can't remember which one it is, I don't have the manual for, but let me know if I do need to scan these, because I would like these to be available to anyone that wants them. But guess what? That is not everything I received with this console. So not only did I get 12 of the North American releases for the Virtual Boy, I also got 2 Japanese releases in the boxes, complete with all documentation. We have the Japanese version of Vertical Force, and then we have V-Tetris, which is a game that did not get a North American equivalent. So let's briefly open these up and take a look at what's inside. So let's start with Vertical Force, and I don't know if images of these boxes are scanned online. If they are not, let me know. Inside we have the game, which is still in its shrink wrap. It's been opened. I've taken it out of the shrink wrap, but this is pretty much as good of a condition as you can get for boxed Virtual Boy games. And then inside here, you have the documentation. So here we have the Vertical Force Japanese manual. What is this? I don't know Japanese, so people who do know Japanese will have to let me know what this is. I think this is a registration card that you would send in, but let me know if I'm wrong on that. And you also have what I assume is the warranty kind of card. I guess it's kind of like a quick start guide. It tells you how to play your console, turn on, take the little black cover off the Virtual Boy game to reveal the connector. That's what these had. These things had covers. So you take this off and then there's the connector right there. And I assume the other side is basically like your warranty and other stuff like that. But still, very cool to have all this. And then of course, your game is right here. And this one I see does not have its black cover. I remember one of these didn't have its cover, so it was this one. All right, here's V-Tetris. This box isn't in as good a shape as the other one. It's got some nicks in the top, but it is still in good shape. It's still formed. It's not like smashed in or creased or anything, so that is great. Pull it out. There's the game right there. This one does not have the shrink wrap. It's just the game. Oh, I see this one doesn't have its cover either. So I guess it was both of these that didn't have a cover, unless it's in the box. And then you have the documentation. So here, it looks like it's the same thing. Oh no, it's not the same thing. This is a different type of registration card. It looks different. Here's the same little quick start guide. So yeah, it looks like it is the same document. And then you, of course, have the V-Tetris manual. So yeah, if there's anything about what I have here that is not easily available to anybody else, like the manuals or the registration cards, anything that I have that I just showed here, let me know in the comments and I'll do my best to scan them in the highest quality that I can. And then of course, here is the V-Tetris game right here. So yeah, that concludes all of the things that I received with my Virtual Boy. And now you can understand why that when I first saw this, I knew that I had to go in and buy it and get all of this amazing stuff to go along with my Virtual Boy. Now let's go ahead and start taking this thing apart and we can talk about what needs to be repaired. So being that I already have the screws to hold the bottom panel together, I can just lift this off like that. And then there's your look at the inside of the Virtual Boy. Two speakers are right here. This is the main motherboard. It's pretty small, but you also have a couple daughter boards, one for the link cable and controller ports, and then the other contains the headphone jack and volume slider. Now, I have had this thing apart before a few times, and I have pillaged a couple things from the inside of this Virtual Boy. What you'll notice right away is if you've ever seen the inside of a Virtual Boy before and know how it works, you'll notice that the displays, which are connected right here with two ribbon cables, are missing. Well, that is the issue that we are going to fix with this Virtual Boy. And it is an issue that has caused many Virtual Boys like mine to die and need repair. Basically, what happens is the ribbon cable that these displays are attached to, the displays are screwed on down here, those ribbon cables, they are not soldered to the actual displays. They're just glued into place. And so what happens is over time, the glue starts to weaken. And so when that happens, when you're playing your Virtual Boy, you'll start seeing lines in the picture, almost as if you had a row of dead pixels on a LCD display. This one actually did work when I received it, but after a few days of playing it, it started to develop those lines. And so what I did was I took the displays out and I removed the ribbon cables from the displays. So now I just have the bare PCBs remaining, and I'll show you what those look like here in a second. So underneath the motherboard, you have this assembly that, actually, before I tell you more about how this thing works, I'm going to show you what the displays look like, because what this console does is so amazing to me. I don't know how it pulls it off, but let me show you how this thing works. The Virtual Boy displays look like this, and there are two. So how these things work is these displays have one row of very tiny red LEDs that display 32 different intensities. So you're probably wondering, how does this turn into something that you can see? It's just one red row of lights. How does that translate into a game that you can see through the Virtual Boy? Well, this is something that I think is absolutely amazing. So here's where all of this comes together. The displays for the Virtual Boy are mounted vertically like this. They're screwed in. They are magnified in here. There's some magnification going on in there. And that magnified image gets reflected onto two little mirrors that are inside the Virtual Boy. The mirrors are mounted like this. And when the Virtual Boy is turned on, these mirrors rotate just like this, very, very fast. And so what happens is these displays have an insanely fast refresh rate. I think I read somewhere that it was like 0.0152 seconds. I could be wrong on that, but basically, the row of lights on these displays change perfectly. They change completely every 0.0152 seconds, or however long the refresh rate is. And so what happens is those rows of lights, they get projected onto the mirrors, and since the mirror is displaying so fast and the displays have such a fast refresh rate, and so when you look in here, you don't even know what's going on because of how fast the refresh rate and the mirror speed is. And so to you, it looks like that you're just seeing a game, when in fact what you're really seeing is the displays changing the row of LEDs very fast and the mirrors syncing up to that display at exactly the right speed. You just see what looks like one still image. And so I think that is absolutely amazing. And so this effect where the mirrors are moving like this is called the parallax effect. And when it does that, since you have two displays, when you look inside this thing, what you see is a 3D image. So it's not just like you're looking at a computer screen. You actually see different levels of depth. And I've played some games on this console before, and it looks really cool. When you play on an emulator, it doesn't look anything like what you see here. And I can actually show you these mirrors. I'm not going to take apart the console any further because what's in here works. And so I don't want to take it apart any further for now. So once you get the Virtual Boy apart, you can actually slide these little red plastic pieces out like that. They come out pretty easily, just like that. And here you can see the two mirrors. And when the Virtual Boy is on, these are spinning and rotating very fast. I think it's 50 hertz. Those are the two mirrors that reflect the magnification of these displays to your eyes. So like I said earlier, these two displays are the main culprits of failure in all Virtual Boys. And so what I've done is I've taken both of them out and I have removed the ribbon cable from both of them. And the ribbon cable is actually permanently attached. It's not a connector. And so what I had to do is use a heat gun and then pull the actual ribbon off of the traces on the back with a pair of tweezers. And so both of those have been removed, and so we're left with just the bare display boards. Over the years, what people have done to try to permanently fix the Virtual Boy and its display problems is they would partially melt the ribbon cable that they're connected to, and then they would just solder on the little connections from the cable to the traces on the back of the displays. But that's not a permanent fix because over time those connections will become kind of weak, just like the glue, because the connections on the actual ribbon are so bad that you'll end up just having the same problems later down the road. But there's one product that has been released that I know of that promises to fix all Virtual Boy displays and hopefully fix them permanently. So, what is that product? It is none other than the Virtual Ribbon. Now, what is the Virtual Ribbon? Basically, it is a set of little PCBs that you can buy that solder directly to the traces on the back of these Virtual Boy displays. And then on the other end of those PCBs, there's a ribbon connector. And then on that connector, you would connect a replacement, much higher quality ribbon cable from the PCBs to the connector on the Virtual Boy itself. So what you would have in the end is a totally stable Virtual Boy display. It would never break again. So I went ahead and bought one of these, and it is Segasonicfan that manufactures these, or at least has these made for him. And he has some good installation videos on how to properly install these to Virtual Boy displays. He does have a new version of them now that consolidates this into just one PCB per display. This is a slightly older version that has 2 PCBs for each display, but it works exactly the same. So these right here are the PCBs that make the Virtual Ribbon work. Now this is version 3.7. He just released version 4, which basically combines these 2 PCBs into one board. So as you can see, we have the main PCB here that the ribbon cable connects to. These ribbon connectors are not pre-soldered to these boards, so I soldered these on. And then you have these 2 little smaller PCBs that will, this one mounts vertically inside the Virtual Boy, and this one goes horizontally off of it. So they're connected at a 90-degree angle like this. And so those will have to get soldered together at some point. And then these smaller traces right here connect to the traces on the actual displays themselves. So now you're probably wondering, why haven't I shown you the traces on the back of these things yet? I've just been talking about them. Well, that's where I kind of messed up in the past. You see, I've tried to install one of these things before, but every time I tried to install it, I would always have a connection issue. One or more of the contacts for the display after it was soldered onto this thing would be bridged. And I probably tried like about 5 or 6 times to reconnect this thing and have it not have issues. But every time I did it, following the exact instructions of Segasonicfan's video, I just could not get it to work properly. And so unfortunately, what ended up happening is on the back of this display, I ended up lifting several of the traces off of the board, which in most situations, you would just say, it's toast, you can't fix it. But I got lucky in that the traces that got lifted were ground traces, and the traces that are for ground are the outermost 3 traces on each side of this display. As you can see, the traces are very small. There is a part of the ground trace on both sides of this display that are still connected, and so I will be able to actually connect these to the Virtual Ribbon PCB after installing it again. And if when doing this repair, one of these traces does come off, it shouldn't be that big of a deal because both grounds on this display are connected internally. At least they will be after this board is installed. I'm going to grab my voltmeter real quick because I want to verify that that's actually true. This display I have not messed with. It is still perfectly fine. So I grabbed the voltmeter. So just to show you that the grounds on the Virtual Ribbon are indeed connected to each other, I'm going to change this over to, oops, that's the wrong button. Change this to continuity mode so that when you put the 2 leads together, it beeps, indicating that you have continuity between point A and point B. So if I go on this PCB right here and connect ground to ground, it beeps. So we have continuity between here and here. And it is the same way on this PCB. So how Segasonicfan has this set up is you connect the little PCB to the display like that. At least that's how you're supposed to do it. So you have to line it up exactly, and make sure that you have no bridged connections when you solder it on. And so how he has it set up is, instead of having 3 separate traces for the ground traces like on the original, he has it as just one continuous pad. So all of those traces will get connected together. So once this is soldered onto the display, all of those ground traces will be connected to each other and it'll form a single ground plane. I just want to verify that they are connected internally on the displays themselves. So what I'm going to do is, I can probably use the bad one since there's still enough trace left. Maybe they aren't connected internally. Maybe they're not. Just want to make sure we have a connection here. Now, based off what I just saw, this must be a modification that Segasonicfan made, was combined the 2 ground planes from those traces into one single plane. And Segasonicfan, if you're watching this, feel free to confirm this in my comments because I don't know for sure. Again, I wasn't the designer of this product, and so I don't know everything about it. But you're probably wondering now that since I tried to do this before in the past and I failed like 5 or 6 times, how is this time going to be any different? Well, I thought about how I might be able to fix this, and I came up with a solution that I think is going to be pretty foolproof. I went online, as any person does, and I bought several spools of very, very thin enamel wire. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to attempt to do, is make some bodge wires. And so what I'm going to do is hook wires up from every tiny little trace on this and hook them up to the traces on the little board here. And so it's not going to be a direct connection like Segasonicfan intended. And I haven't totally come up with a plan for how exactly I'm going to mount this to the display. I'm thinking about doing hot glue. That's something I'm going to have to think about before going into it, because after I do the bodge wires, then I can just hook these 2 boards together as intended, because the traces on these ends are much bigger and I can solder those no problem. So I will be back once I come up with a solid plan for how exactly I'm going to do this, and then we'll get started on the repair that I've been wanting to do for a long time. Here's a closer up shot of the PCBs and the displays, because I realized that my camera angle was not really that close up on them. So here's a better view of what those look like. So after spending some time thinking about how exactly I'm going to do this, I think I've come up with a plan. I'm going to do somewhat of a direct connection like Segasonicfan intended, where it's going to be mounted to the display like that. But what I'm going to do is, on the side that goes toward the display, I'm going to put some Kapton tape above the traces there so that these and these don't short out, because of course I'm going to be using bodge wires and connecting to the top instead of the bottom, because the traces on the top and bottom are connected to each other. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to hot glue this PCB to the display just like that. I don't think I'm going to do that. Well, maybe. Should I hot glue first or should I solder first? It would probably make it easier on me if I just hot glued first, because if I don't, then it's going to be kind of hard to solder these tiny little wires onto. Oh, you know what? I have a piece of equipment that I think is going to solve this problem. So let me grab that and I'll just show you what I think I can do. This is something that I bought fairly recently that is a huge help to me when soldering things. It has a little thing that you can push together to hold circuit boards tightly. It has 2 little things that you slot the circuit board into, and then a couple things to tighten them down so that this doesn't move and that these things don't move. It's got 2 little things that you can use to grab stuff, and it's very rigid. It does not move after you put it in a position that you want it. So You can bend it, move it every which way, and it doesn't change its position. This is all magnetic, so I can take it off easily, as you can see. And it also has a magnifying glass with a built-in LED light under it. So if I hook this cable up to a USB port, I'm able to use this little control strip here to turn on this light. And it has several different brightness levels, but I always keep it on full brightness because this light does not introduce any glare really on what I'm working on. It's very nice to look through. And you can also cycle between 3 different color temperatures: warm, kind of warm and cool, a hybrid of the two, and then this is the cool. I like keeping it on cool because it looks the most natural to me. So that is what we're going to be using throughout this repair. And this isn't the only thing I have that I'll probably be using. I also have this. This is probably not the best thing to use, but this is a microscope. It's a USB-powered microscope. Hook it up to your computer, and there's software that you can capture up to a 1600 by 1200 live feed of what this microscope sees. It has a thing here that you can focus it with so you can see real clear. But this isn't the best microscope ever because it does introduce a lot of glare onto what you're doing on the software, so it can be hard to see sometimes. So at this point, we kind of know what we're doing. I have all the tools that I need in order to do this repair. I'm not promising success, but I think the chance of success is going to be much, much higher than what I was dealing with before in just trying to solder those things together directly. So the process that I'm going to be doing just makes it way easier for me, and it's still going to be just as good of a solution as what the original intent of the virtual ribbon was. So I think at this point we are ready to start. So I'm going to get all my stuff set up, and we will begin the lengthy process of restoring the Virtual Boy. Okay, so unfortunately you're probably not going to get a super good angle of what I'm doing here, but I'll move this out of the way temporarily just so you can see what I'm gonna do. So the display is going to be hooked onto here, and then this is going to get grabbed on with this, and I am going to, oh, you know what? I need to put the tape on underneath, because if I don't do that, the whole thing doesn't work. So I gotta do that real quick. Okay, countdown tape, where are you? I'm just taking some of this countdown tape, which is all it is heat-resistant tape, and it protects these traces from shorting out on the display because I don't want them to touch. So they're going to put a piece of tape directly across these traces, and then we will hot glue. So that is how that looks with the tape applied. So now those traces will not short out against the display. So now we begin. This is going to be hooked together like that. And we're now ready to apply this. And I'm going to try to line it up as best I can. It doesn't have to be perfect because we're not dealing with the intentional way to do it, but I do want to try to get it as good as I possibly can. So this is the point where I'm going to take over, and you guys will probably not be able to see what I'm doing. Okay, it's holding itself together. Look at that. It's holding itself together. That's all I want right now, so I can do the rest of it. Just like that. So that worked. Awesome. That was kind of the thing I wanted to get sorted, is this actually going to work? But yep, it sure is. I might put a little more, but oh no, it doesn't need more at all. Look how stable that is. See? Hot glue comes to the rescue sometimes. I just want to make sure that any excess glue is dealt with. And so I might have to do some cleaning up. So this is pass 1. It's a little dirty, kind of looking over here. I'm going to clean this up, but it's not covering any traces that I need to solder to. I put a little bit of glue on the edge here. These are the first 2 points that I did. And then on the back, I did a little line of glue right there, and this thing is as stable as a rock. So that is going to be how I do it on the other one. So this time on the other display, I'm actually going to remove the original glue because I have not done that on the other one, and for that one I'll have to use like a razor blade to do that because it's kind of stuck on there. Oh yeah, coming right off. Okay, original glue is gone. You can see the little bit there. That's what I just took off. So that's gone, and that is now trash. Okay, the tape has been applied to the other PCB, so now we are ready to clamp them together and glue. It doesn't look as pretty, but it is fine. I can clean it up later if I really want to, but this glue does not affect anything, so it doesn't have to be pretty. It could probably use some strength on the other side. Ooh, yeah, it could. It definitely needs some strength on the other side, so as long as I give it a little bit right there, it should stabilize. There we are. Let's see if I can clean up the front. So now we're stable. This is the bad display, the one that kind of got screwed up. So let me just show you in detail what happened. So as you can see, most of the traces are still good. As you can see, they're still on the display. But if I move this over here, you can see some of the damage. There are 3 traces, and I'll point them out with my spudger. This trace here used to be more complete. As you can see, there's a little bit missing here. I'm going to try to use this trace for connecting the ground connections. I don't know if that will stay. And then there are 3 other traces here that got ripped off. I mean, this part is still there, but it's not connected to anything anymore, but that's okay because these are ground traces. Unfortunately, one of the display traces, that's this one right here, broke off. So what I did was I scraped away some of the solder mask that is right here. So I have a point to which I can solder a wire to. So I will still be able to use that trace, but I'm going to have to connect it down here instead of up here like on all these other traces. And if we go to the other side, you can see kind of a similar story. It's not as bad over here. 2 of the ground traces peeled off right here, and then most of this trace, that actually might still be there, but what I'm seeing is right here at the very bottom, those are the only points to which the trace is still there. I think this is just gone. I mean, I can try to solder to it, but I don't think that is a solderable area anymore. So fortunately, there is no other damage to this display, so I think it is still usable, but I will obviously have to be careful because I have stressed these traces way too much at this point, and I want to be as little invasive on this display as I can when I do this work. So I want to get this done and then never have to touch those traces again because it's very flaky at this point. So now let me show you the good display and we can see what it's supposed to look like. This display, I have not tinned any of the traces, so you can still see the glue residue from where the ribbon cable used to be. I tried to clean it off the best I could, but it's still kind of dirty. Unfortunately, the only really good way to clean it is to heat it up with a heat gun and then use a toothpick to get it off. So this is the best that I could make it for now. I will still be able to tin those, but as you can see, the traces on these are absolutely fine. And I should be able to use this display, and this should be the easier of the 2 to work on. And one more thing I want to do real quick before we get started is just show you guys a close-up of the Virtual Boy display. As you can see, it is a Sanyo manufactured display, so Nintendo did not make this. And then there's the model number right there. And so if we bring this over, there's light, there's glare from the light. Let's turn the desk light on and turn the scope off. There we go. So now you can see what this little array of LEDs looks like. It's just one row of tiny little LEDs in the middle of that. So you can see those tiny little wires that are connected from traces internal to the little plastic here and go directly to the array of red LEDs. So this is how it looks when you view it under a microscope. Now let's go ahead and get started and get everything set up. So this is what we look like. We got some glue here. It's not covering anything that I need to get to. We got some glue stabilizing the side there. And then on this side, the glue is holding the entire thing together there. And so that is what both of them look like. I'll show you the other one. This one's a little cleaner. I didn't put glue on the back just because I didn't know how much trace I would have, because I kind of did this one blindly. I actually lined it up really well. Like I said, it didn't have to be perfect, and I can see it's not perfect, but it is good enough. I did have to melt the glue on the sides a little bit because I actually test fit these in the Virtual Boy, and they initially didn't fit at first, so I had to use the soldering iron and melt a little bit of this glue away a bit on the side. But now, at this point, both of them fit perfectly in the Virtual Boy, which is amazing. Let's focus that. This doesn't look as clean here. I might put some more on it later, but it is holding it and it is stable. So you can see I'm tapping it. Nothing's happening, so that is solid. Here's what we're going to be using, if it's on the camera, this wire here. This is 0.1 millimeter wire, and these are 0.5 millimeter traces. So this wire should be thin enough to make this work. And I have smaller wire at the ready if we need to go that far. What I'm going to attempt to do is get some solder on that via right there, and then solder the wire there, and then go up to the board right there. So let's get some flex around that. Just a little bit is all that's needed. I know that's not what Lewis Rossman says, but that's all that's needed, is just a little bit, because I'm just doing this little area. So that's all I need for there. So here goes nothing. So I just want to get some on that via like that. You see how I got some solder to kind of fill that? Hopefully. I think that's connected. That is connected. So now what I'm going to do is, because I have slack in the spool, I want to keep that slack, but I want to bring the spool up here. I know you can't see what I'm doing, but I'm moving the spool up to the other end. Okay, stay there, wire. You can do it. I know you can. There it is. There's the first bodge wire. Now it's kind of hard to see because all the flux is there. Here's what we're going to test for continuity. I'm just going to wipe the probes off later. Go from ground to ground. Continuity. There you go. There we go. That's the first bodge wire. And I just have a ton more to go. And what I'm going to do is, obviously since that's really hard to do on camera, you saw I kind of struggled with that, I am going to do the rest of the bodging off camera. And I will show you what this display looks like once I've bodged all of its traces. This is one that I really wanted to get good because that trace had already started coming off. Half of it was missing. So I'm glad I was able to connect from that via to the board. So that trace is now saved. So that is good. So now I just have to do that same thing to all the rest of these. And then we should have a working display. So wish me luck, because this is going to be a very lengthy process and it's probably going to take a couple tries per wire, but I should be able to do it. I'll show you guys what it looks like at the end. Okay, so we'll go down from where I did my first bodge wire, and as you can see, every trace going from the display to the little PCB has been bodged with a little thin piece of wire. And the process went very well. There were a few little hiccups along the way, but I was able to resolve all of those, and now each trace has its own wire and it's making a solid connection. It's not the prettiest thing, like the tips of these wires are not soldered down. I can move them around, but they do have a firm connection more down in the middle here. So I'm not too worried about that since I can straighten those wires out. They're already pretty straight. So all of those are making a firm connection from both sides, the PCB and the display. And now I just have to solder the other little PCB to the end of here on the other side, and then we can hook up the ribbon cable, put it in the Virtual Boy, and see if it actually works. I'll be very surprised if it does. I mean, there's no reason why this shouldn't work. And as you saw earlier, the ground trace here is connected internally on this board to this other trace right here. So everything should work just fine when I solder the PCB to this set of traces here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay, so when soldering this part of the PCB to here, it's going to be installed at a 90-degree angle like this. And so what I need to do to get the solder to be able to adhere to that easily is just put some flex across here, like that. Get a good line of flex right there. I'll set this back a little bit, and I'll use it to kind of push that flex forward. And then just so this thing can hold itself up, I'm going to solder only the ground traces. So those are the two edge ones. And then all that's really necessary now is just solder each one, and then it'll work. And then we should be able to put it in. All right. So this right here is the final product soldered on, and here it is with a ribbon cable attached. So now it's the moment of truth. Let's put it in the Virtual Boy and see if this first display actually works. And there it is. It actually fits. It fits perfectly. So now I just have to screw the display in, and then we'll see if it actually works. I'm excited. Okay, once this thing is together, it'll kind of be more squished like this. This is just for testing, obviously. So it's connected. So now I'm going to connect the controller and the AC power supply to the Virtual Boy, and I'm going to tell you if this display is working correctly. Okay, everything is connected. The Virtual Boy controller is connected, which is connected to power. And I put in Virtual Boy Wario Land because in order for the Virtual Boy to show anything on its displays, it has to have a game in. So now I'm going to switch this on, and I'm going to look in here, and I will see if that display is working. So I'll kind of turn it around here. Let's switch on, and let's see. Oh my goodness, it's working. It's actually working fully. Oh my gosh, that is insane. It's working. Wow. I can't believe it. All the lines are normal, like there's no missing lines or anything. There's no red lines, missing lines. It's a completely perfect image. Oh, that's awesome. That tells me all the traces were connected perfectly, and there's no issues, there's no shorts. It's all making a solid connection. I can't believe it. It's working perfectly. Wow. Oh, that is so relieving to me that that works, because now I'm way more sure that I can get the second display to do the exact same thing, just work on the first try. So that is an amazing success. I can't believe that. So now I guess we get started on the second display. I can't believe that that's working. Cool. Let's keep going. All right, so here we have the second Virtual Boy display under the microscope. So this is going to be the same process as the first display, except for on this one, I'll need to tin the traces first because I have not touched this display before or now. But as you saw on the first display, these two traces right here, these two, were missing on the first one because they got lifted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to not bother with those traces at all and just do this edge one because that's all it needs. And I know that because we just saw the first Virtual Boy display working. So the only ground traces that this thing needs, well, it really only needs the one from here to here because the ground planes are connected internally on the Segasonicfan board. But on this display, I am going to connect the second ground trace from here to here because that trace is actually there on this display. So I might as well connect that up. Other than those changes, this is going to be the exact same process as the first display. So I will come back to you once this display is finished. All right, and here we have the second display finished. Process on this one went very well. I didn't have any issues doing the soldering. And then here's what we look like on the Segasonicfan PCBs. So everything's ready to go. So I'm going to attach the ribbon cable, put this whole assembly in the Virtual Boy, and then we'll test this one out. Okay, the second Virtual Boy display is now installed and it fit perfectly. So everything's connected to power. Let's switch on the Virtual Boy and see what we get. Ooh, we have an issue. Okay, so it's mostly working. One of the lines, it looks like one of the lines is missing. So let me take a look for just a second. Okay, yeah, so on this one, we still have a loose connection. So that's okay because it is mostly working. So I am going to take this display back out and see where that connection problem is. Okay, so a lot of time has passed, and as you can see, I completely disassembled my entire wiring on the second Virtual Boy display. And that is because I spent a long time trying to figure out what in the heck was causing the problem. And I finally figured out that this display actually has an internal defect. So let me show you what's the matter. So on the Virtual Boy display, there are two instances where there are two traces combined with each other. So that would be this one here and this one here. So there are two traces right next to each other that combine into these bigger pads here. So both of those have continuity with each other. But I found out that this bigger pad right here actually is shorting out with the one next to it right here. And that should not happen. And basically what was going on was I was using my multimeter to try and figure out where these shorts were happening because I was looking at the wiring job on here, I was looking at the connections on the display, and nothing was shorting against each other. There was no solder bridging. All the solder connections looked good. It was just those two connections that were giving me issues. The rest were perfect. So my initial thought was, well, maybe the Segasonicfan board is touching the Virtual Boy display somewhat. So what I did was I heated up the hot glue that was adhered to the display, and I just ever so slightly lifted the board from the display so that the glue still held, but there was a tiny little gap between the display and the Segasonicfan board. And that, as you can imagine, did not fix the issues. So now I hated to do this, but I was only left with one other choice, and that was to remove this entire board assembly from the display so I could figure out what was shorting. And then when I took my multimeter and I measured the continuity between here and the trace next to it, see, they're shorting out. And so that is why when I put this display in, it didn't work. I was missing a couple lines on the display, and when I was touching the wires against the display, it would cause all sorts of weird lines to show up on the display. So unfortunately, because this display has a defect, I can't use it. And I did validate that all of my soldering work was perfect. No contacts themselves were shorting in terms of my wiring job. So if this display didn't have a defect, it would have worked perfectly. So I would have been 2 for 2 on fixing these displays. So that's a total shame. So unfortunately at this point, the only way that I'm gonna be able to fix this Virtual Boy is to order another display off of eBay for it. And the cheapest ones that are on eBay right now, there's only a few, are $110 a piece. And that's quite a lot of money for just a Virtual Boy display. But something caught my attention on eBay that turned out to be a way better purchase. And I think what I bought is going to help me fix this Virtual Boy and make it work perfectly again. I bought another one. This is a complete Virtual Boy that didn't come with anything else besides just the console for $95 and $11 shipping. So I was able to get a complete Virtual Boy console, so it has 2 displays in it for a lower price than just a single Virtual Boy display. So I thought that was a way better deal. So now I have a path forward. I'm going to be using this Virtual Boy here to fix my Virtual Boy, because this Virtual Boy is not in as good of a condition as this one. And I don't even know if this one works. I bought it as an untested console. The previous owner said that he bought it at a garage sale and he didn't have the power supply to test it. And the previous owner said that the garage sale people said it worked. So I think what we're gonna do is take a brief look at this console, plug it in, and see if it even works. All right, so this here is Virtual Boy number 2. And it is a complete console by the looks of it. It hasn't been taken apart or tampered with. The tops of the IPD and focus knobs are a little bit scratched up, and the shell overall is a bit more scratched than on my other Virtual Boy. So I think I'm going to be stealing parts from this to fix my console because it's in better condition. But it isn't bad. It's got some scratching on the front. It probably needs to be magic erased up here to get all these marks off, but I did give it a once over lightly just to clean up the dust layer that was on it. So now it looks much better. Here's the front here. The 2 lens pieces look good. They're not really scratched. And I did make sure there are actually 2 displays in there because you can see them when you look in there, and there are 2 displays, so that's great. On the bottom, it looks just the same as the other one. Not bad, not the best either, but it is a complete console. Everything's there, none of the screws are missing, so I think that this was a good purchase to help me continue my quest to fix the Virtual Boy. So now I'm gonna go ahead and plug it in, and we'll see if any of the 2 displays in there actually work. Okay, so the Virtual Boy is now plugged into power and ready to be switched on. So I don't know if this thing has seen power in a long time, so it may not work. And I doubt that this Virtual Boy has been modified or fixed in any way, so I am fully expecting there to be lines on at least one of the displays in there. I'm hoping I'm lucky in that it actually works perfectly, but the chances of that are pretty slim. So I'm gonna go ahead and switch it on, and I will tell you what I see. The mirrors are spinning, or they're moving. And I see absolutely nothing, which is weird. Yeah, absolutely nothing is showing up. Oh, you know why? You know why nothing's showing up? Because I didn't put a game in it. Let's try that again. Okay, we have Virtual Boy Wario Land in it. Now let's see what it looks like. Ooh, it's working somewhat. You know what's amazing? It's actually working. None of the displays have lines. That's awesome. The display on the right is flickering periodically, but they are both working. And the one on the left is not doing anything wrong at all. So did I get seriously lucky or what? And now the one on the right is not flickering. So we have a perfectly stable and working Virtual Boy right here. That's awesome. So I'm gonna go through some screens here and we'll do some tests to see if the sound is working. Yep, it's working. Both speakers are working, I can tell. I'm gonna turn the volume down a little because it's kind of loud. There you go. Oh, you know what? The display on the left actually has a line going through it now. Yeah. The one on the right is good. Oh, no, it isn't. The one on the left has one line that is missing, and the one on the right is intermittently flickering, like being really dim. It's going between really dim and normal. So obviously this console does need the solder work treatment. So I'm glad it's working as good as it is, but it unfortunately is going to need the solder treatment. So I will have to be doing that a third time. I'm going to go ahead and take this thing apart and we'll get on working on the displays in here. Okay, so I went ahead and removed all the screws on the bottom of the Virtual Boy. So now I can take this off, and let's take the bottom cover off and see what we see inside. And there is our first look inside the second Virtual Boy, and it looks completely untouched to me. So this is what it looks like with two unmodified displays inside the Virtual Boy. So for now, I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try doing the temporary fix on one of these Virtual Boy displays. So what I'm gonna do for the moment is just take a heat gun and heat up the point where the ribbon cable connects to the display and just try to get that glue to start working again. I want to see if I can revive totally one of these displays just by doing that. So I'm going to take one of them out and we'll see what we can do. And I think I'm going to be doing this one here because this is the one that was wanting to go dim on me. So to get the Virtual Boy display out, I first have to remove the speaker that's right beside it, just kind of unroute it a bit. And then I will have access to the screws. Now, what is going to make it easier is if I turn the IPD knob, and this is where I can show you what that knob does. If I turn the IPD knob, it actually turns the entire assembly that the Virtual Boy displays are mounted on. It actually moves it in and out, as you can see. And all that IPD knob does is make it so that when you look into here, that none of the parts of these two displays are blocked so that you can see everything. So you just turn that knob until the entire display is visible to your eyes. So that's all that does. So to make it easy on yourself, what you can do is turn the IPD knob so that the entire assembly is all the way inward. So now you have very good access to the two screws holding the display on. So what I'm going to do first is remove the ribbon cable from the connector, and then I will take out the display. And then the display will just pop right out, like that. Okay, so this right here is the Virtual Boy display with its original ribbon cable. And you can see how the ribbon cable is kind of bent. It doesn't want to straighten out. And of course, that's just because it's been sitting in the console in this orientation for many years. And so what I need to do for the temporary fix is just heat up the glue that's underneath the ribbon cable and try to straighten it out as best I can so that the contacts on the ribbon cable actually make good contact with the traces on the display. So I'm going to do that now. And I'm going to put the heat gun to a very low temperature and a very low power. Ooh, see how that's making a difference? See how the ribbon cable's starting to move down? That means this is working. All right, so that should be the fix completed. And before I did this fix, what I saw was that the glue was no longer adhered to the actual ribbon cable right here, and now I can tell that it is, now that I did this fix. So the glue is now stuck to the ribbon cable here, and the ribbon cable looks much more straight than it did before. So this is basically the temporary fix in a nutshell. I have no idea if this is gonna work. I tried it originally on my other Virtual Boy and it did not work, but I was a little more thorough on my attempt here. So now let's put it back in and see if it works. Oh yeah, that made it worse. Now there's nothing there, which is weird. How
can there be nothing there? I wonder if it needs the ground. Oh, it needs the ground connection. That's why it needs the ground connection. Okay, so that's why there's nothing there. Noted. I'm going to screw the ground cable in and then we'll hopefully get something. But it wasn't dim. When I touched the ground cable to the ground pad, it was not dim. So hopefully I'll be able to get a reliable result after I screw in the screw that secures the ground cable. So let me do that real quick. Let me do that real quick. Okay, so now that's screwed in and now I don't have to hold the display in. So let's try that again. Third time. It isn't dim, and I don't see any lines. Let's go into the actual game. Oh, look at that. It looks good. It's not dim. I think we may have just fixed this Virtual Boy display. Oh, but you know what? It is starting to get little lines in it. Not anything terrible, but there are a little bit of lines in the picture that I'm seeing. Okay, so I just found something out about these two displays that I hoped wasn't the case, but unfortunately is. So I wanted to use my multimeter and take a look at these displays to see if any of the contacts were bridged, and sure enough, both of these displays are bridged in the exact same way as the other display. So unfortunately, even if I was to do the permanent solder work, I don't think it would fix the displays to be 100% perfect. So I think what I'm gonna do for now is I'm gonna take the good display that only has one line missing, which is this one right here. I took it out of the Virtual Boy. And I'm gonna put that one in my other console for now, because it's only one line. It's not a huge deal. So unfortunately, I think that's gonna have to be how it is for a while. I might send the displays into Segasonicfan to get the virtual ribbon put on properly, but for the moment, I'm just gonna put this display in my better condition console and call it good, because at this point, that's all I can do. Okay, so this right here is my original Virtual Boy, and I put the display from the other one in it, and I can safely say that the only problem it has is that one missing horizontal line on the display that I put in it. Otherwise, everything else works 100% perfectly. So this isn't the outcome I hoped for, obviously. I wanted to get both of the Virtual Boy displays working perfectly, but if there's only one horizontal line on one of the displays that's missing, I think I can safely say that it's good enough. Because I played it for a little bit just before I started recording this clip, and half of the time I didn't even notice that line. So I would say that this console is as good as it's going to get for now. But what I am very glad about is that I was able to save the Virtual Boy display that I damaged myself when I initially tried to repair this thing. So that's amazing. I fixed something that I didn't think was ever going to work again. And I have a basically 95% working display on the other side. So there's really nothing that I can complain about, because what we came from before, a console that didn't work at all because of its displays having issues, now being something I can actually play, that's an improvement. So I think where we are now is much better than when we were before, and I'm glad that this thing is actually a playable console now, even though it's got one slight problem still. And unfortunately, that's just kind of how these things are. The displays weren't designed properly from the beginning, so all of them are eventually going to have problems at this point, and we just need to realize that the Virtual Boy is not a perfect console, and really the best way to experience games that were designed for the Virtual Boy is through emulation, because these things are rare, and it would take an experienced person to be able to fix one of these to actually get it working to a point where it looks good. So for most people, I would recommend emulating the Virtual Boy. It's still a great experience, even though you don't have the increased depth that the Virtual Boy gives you because of its 3D effect. It still looks great in emulation, and it's just as fun. So I'm gonna end the Virtual Boy repair video here. If you've stayed until the end, thank you so much for watching. It's been amazing trying to get this thing working again.
and I can't wait to be playing it for a good while longer and seeing how it performs over time. So that's going to be it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.